Okay, so it's 6:35, so we're gonna call the meeting to order. Hopefully Mark's gonna get here soon. I haven't heard from him that he's not coming, so just assuming he's taking care of animals. So first order of business, as always, is to review and make any changes to the agenda. Two changes that I'd like to make. One is, if it's okay with folks, if we can, for tonight's meeting, just take revisions to the dog ordinance complaint process off. Because we have a pretty full agenda that's not pressing, and I need to get a clean copy of the edits back out to everybody for review prior to the meeting, which I didn't have time to do. So if there's no issues there, we'll take off item 5B. And then there was one item under Public Works that I was going to ask Mark if we needed to add or not, but that's the dedication of acceptance offer from Don and Sandy Crocker for that little bit of Cote Road. I don't know if they have the paperwork for that ready tonight to sign, but for now, if we can add under Public Works, Roads and Bridges, dedication acceptance of the Crocker material, that'd be great. And then we might just pass over it if it's not ready, but at least it's on the agenda. Mm-hmm. So with that, we will be looking for a motion to approve the minutes of August 1st. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of August 1st?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of August 1st.
Great, we have a motion to approve by Suzanne. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Great, is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we will vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes as written, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Yes.
One abstention, so motion carries 3-0-1 with Leanne abstaining. For now, if there's no objection, let's pass over Public Works in the hope that Mark gets here. Any objection to passing over Public Works for now?
No.
Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to the Municipal, Wastewater, and Streetscape projects under old business. Update here on the wastewater front is that we're continuing conversations with the engineers, trying to refine some of the flow and ERU or user calculations as it pertains to the capacity of the system, as it pertains to some of the budget numbers that end up getting crunched into the final user fees. We still have the spreadsheet that we've all seen, and it's changed a little bit here and there in terms of like small numbers, but conceptually we're still looking at the same framework. The only difference being that as we go through and finalize or clarify kind of like users, day one users on the system versus growth in users based on build out scenarios, the user fee projections can vary. So we're trying to hammer that out now to make sure we're all 100% clear on who would be in the system area. And again, just to say it one more time, we're looking to mirror the service area of the wastewater system in the village and the center to the water system. So if you or your property, well, it'd be your property. If your property is connected to or within the water system service area, you would be in the wastewater service system area. On the streetscapes front, people have probably seen the survey crew out there over the past couple weeks. So the survey crew is rolling on the Streetscape Engineering work that we've discussed at the last couple meetings. What they're basically doing now is figuring out what is there in terms of actual space and place and elevation and all the kinds of stuff that we didn't know specifically when they did their initial kind of aerial schematics. Mm-hmm. So this is to figure out what fits where. There's still a whole lot of decisions to be made about what we actually would do, build, how it would fit, how it pertains to the right-of-way, whether or not we take over Main Street like we've talked about before. So all those questions are still have to be answered. The survey crew is basically just getting the groundwork down so that we know what we're dealing with so that we can make those next decisions. And as we talked about before, there's multiple points in that process whereby we're going to hold public information meetings, landowner abutting meetings. So this is just one step so that we can go into those conversations knowing everything that we need to know. Any questions on the survey work or anything? Or stop me if I Okay, so that's progressing there. We did finally get, at the last meeting, we had talked about the actual engineering service agreement with Hoyle Tanner. So this is, just to back up again, myself, Mark, Aaron, and Jesse were on the committee that looked at 3 different engineering firms to do the engineering work in the center. This work's being supported by the Transportation Alternative Grant. We selected Hoyle Tanner. Hoyle Tanner came back and they gave us the engineering service agreement, like the whole scope of work, with the timelines, the budgets, all that kind of stuff. We were working on refining that with them. Nothing major, just small things over the last month almost. As we talked about last time, we did give them permission to move forward on the most immediate scope of work, such as the survey work, given where we are in the season and the surveyor availability. So the agreement that we finally have now is the full execution of that agreement. And so since we now have that in hand, tonight what we would need to do is to formally just adopt the agreement for engineering consulting services, VTrans project number Montgomery TAP TA21(5) Municipality of Montgomery. So this is the formal acceptance of that agreement that we've discussed the past 2 meetings. It's a 99-page document. Again, we've gone through it with the engineers, with the state, with Linda Blash, who's our municipal grant manager for this. So Linda's managing it for regional planning. So tonight, all we need to do is make a formal motion to adopt the engineering service agreement so that I can sign this and get it back to them. Any questions there?
No.
Okay. If not, then what we would need is a motion to accept the engineering. Let me read it back. A motion to accept the agreement for engineering consultant services with Hoyle Tanner for VTrans project number Montgomery TAP TA21(5). Is there a motion to that effect?
Are you confident in that agreement and everything that it lays out?
Yeah, I mean, as we talked about last time, this is one part of a bigger puzzle that we're still figuring out, right? Because pursuant to this conversation, the next update is NBRC got back to us. And if you remember last time we had the discussion about NBRC, we asked for $1 million for construction. They came back and said, what about 800,000? They then came back a couple days later and said, what about, hang on, I'll give you the exact number. They came back and said, what about $817,908.37? And I said, well, the board was comfortable with 800,000, so another $17,908.37. I guess we would take that as well. So anyway, so we still need to go after additional money for construction. So there's still other parts of this we have to raise money for before we can actually move forward with it. But the engineering work is what's going to give us the groundwork to then go forward with it. Yeah. So again, it's not like this is something that is over and done with. It's going to be a continual process of work. But the engineering service agreement, they've answered all the questions that we've had, gotten back to it, answered all of VTrans questions. So as far as the agreement goes, there's no questions with what's in it.
All right, then I'll make a motion as you stated.
Okay, great. So we have a motion to accept the agreement by Suzanne. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Leanne. Is there any more discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, motion carries 4-0. So we will formally get that back to them. Again, they've already started work on the surveying part of it. Again, there was the time sensitivity around some of that, so we gave them the provisional approval there. We'll get that back to the state, get it back to Linda, we'll keep moving there, and then hopefully in the next month, we'll be back with some other funding options, whether it's a bike ped grant or money from the IIJA, which is federal money coming to the state through the infrastructure bill that was passed. So that's the main update there, the last part of this is that on the wastewater front, we're now moving into a period where the engineers are now gonna need to go out on the properties that are being connected and start doing some work just to figure out like where is their septic tank, essentially is the first question. So I'm trying to work with the engineers to figure out what their schedules are like, but what I'd like to do after talking with them is try to schedule a public meeting for the week after Labor Day. Anything before Labor Day I feel like is not gonna happen because it's really quickly coming up and also everyone's on vacation. So if we scheduled it for like the week after Labor Day or the following week, the hope is that we can get people together in a room, or at least get most of them in the room, to answer questions, talk about this, talk about the next steps for on the ground work, and then try to move the ball forward there. The alternative would be just straight up sending letters to people, and just doing that. I think the response there probably wouldn't be what we'd want it to be. So, are people comfortable with looking to schedule a public meeting the week after Labor Day? And if so, is there a night that week that works for people? So Labor Day is late this year, it's on the 5th, so we're looking at the 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th.
I'm open any of those days.
Would Thursday night work for you, or are you working Thursday night?
Thursday night would work, yeah.
Would work, or you are working?
That would work,
Okay.
yeah. I usually do
Would
them.
Thursday night work for you guys, the 8th?
Maybe.
If not, I mean, it's not required that we're all there, I just wanted to see if that date would, because typically if we have public meetings, we usually do them Thursdays or Saturdays, so.
What time?
Probably try to do it at 6 or 6:30. I gotta connect with the engineers to make sure I know what time works for them, but,
Probably 6:30 would work.
okay. So we will target, September 8th at 6:30, and I will see if that works for the engineers, and then we will try to get notices out to people as soon as humanly possible. So that's the update, basically, on what's happening now, where we're at with the wastewater and the streetscape projects. Any questions on that? Or anything from the board? Okay. Moving on through old business, town employee contract renewals. So we have the contracts here in front of us. These are all what we went over with the various employees. Emily, you've seen these.
Yeah.
Leanne just saw them. So essentially, the main highlights just to cover here. So the duties are all the same for the treasurer. The big change there was the movement to salary, which we discussed.
Yep.
And then the holiday schedule around the July 4th week. And then on both Liz and Genevieve, there's the rate increase that we discussed to try to bring them more in line with what everyone else is paying their clerk and assistant clerks.
Yep.
And the same holiday schedule. And then same with Genevieve, the wage increase here, what we talked about, and then the holiday schedule. So if you want, we can do them all as a package. Motion to adopt contract renewals for treasurer, clerk, and assistant clerk. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Leanne. Is there a second?
One second.
Great. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Me.
Yeah?
Yeah, unless we split them.
Well, we don't have to because we have a majority and you can still abstain.
Perfect.
Okay. that because your neighbor sometimes brings you veggies or something?
Yeah, she does occasionally.
I thought she was out the other night looking peanut butter off your electric fence. That's what I.
No, that was a bear.
Sure. Great. So these are here to be executed tonight. So just make sure that we sign off on those. The employees have already signed them. So that's there. The only other contract renewal thing, it's not technically a contract, we don't have a contract with him, but this came up in conversation at the last meeting, and we never actually formally acted on it, at least according to the minutes. But if you recall, our constable reached out and he asked if he could basically get a pay increase because he hasn't seen one in a decade, 15 years. I didn't see it in the minutes. Was it last meeting?
Yes.
I think it was the one before.
The one before?
It was the one I was here for, and that was after I left.
Okay, let me quickly check that then. That would be the 7/26.
Last meeting, we set Linda's contract rate too, I think. Was that the same?
The 7/26 meeting was just the special meeting about the wastewater.
I think it was the last.
The last meeting was the first, and we did, Linda, we did approve Brent to assist with the dog census at the same hourly rate, but we didn't adjust anything having to do with constable at the last meeting.
Oh. Okay.
So we formally appointed Brent to assist with the dog census at the request of Linda with the same hourly rate and reimbursement schedule. And we talked about the constable rate and the fact that we hadn't raised it in 15 to 20 years. But we didn't actually act on it. So the formal action tonight would be, as discussed, to raise the constable's hourly rate to $25 an hour.
I would make that motion.
I'll second that.
Great. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, motion carries. Thanks. All right, next up on the agenda is item D under old business. This is circling back to the short-term rental ordinance material which was offered by the Planning Commission for our consumption, and then getting back to them with notes, comments, next steps, all that stuff. So two people, Alyssa and Peter, are here from the Planning Commission. Do either of you guys want to say anything before it opens up to board discussion about the proposal or anything?
Just briefly, the purpose of the proposal is to recognize the fact that it is expanding kind of exponentially over the last few years. It's largely unregulated. It's consuming housing stock that might otherwise be used. It's sorely needed in the town, especially the lower end housing. And they're unregulated in safety terms as well. Fire codes, they're not subject to the same as long-term rentals or commercial establishments. So we felt it was appropriate to propose an ordinance to better understand the scope of what's going on in terms of how many are there and how fast are they expanding, and some reasonable regulation. And that's what the ordinance points 1 through 12 are about.
And the reason we chose to go through an ordinance instead of zoning bylaws was under the advice of regional planning suggested going in that direction. First, that Greta said that we could eventually work in both directions, but to put an ordinance in first, she felt it was easier to enforce and it would be quicker action going with an ordinance, and then when we revise the bylaws, then we could bring it in line with that.
Okay, so that was one of the questions I was trying to remember today was why ordinance versus zoning? Because like the Killington template that you guys worked from,
It's bylaw.
it's from the zoning bylaw, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and the expeditious nature of it is that because we can pass an ordinance here, there's a 30-day reconsideration period. If there's no formal petition for reconsideration by the town, which would force a vote on it, then it goes into effect. Whereas zoning, for an update, there's a longer process that does involve a full community vote.
Yep. And the
Regardless.
hearings
Okay. So would the idea be that, maybe this hasn't come up in discussion yet, but when you get to the zoning bylaw revisions, would the idea be that we would incorporate the ordinance material into there and sunset the ordinance? Or would we have them both? Because one of the things I'm wrestling with is how this ordinance would currently line up with what we have in zoning already. Because like there's an existing conditional use approval process. As the planning commission talked about, would this supplant that or go in tandem with that? Or
I couldn't remember, I was trying to remember if the planning commission has had that discussion. I think in the very beginning, I guess at this point, maybe if I'm speaking from like just myself and not like representing the planning commission, I think there'd be both right now. Because I'm pretty sure at one point we had a discussion with the DRB or ARMA about how it would, because they asked for more information from us also, so then they could use the ordinance to help guide their decisions for the conditional use, but I think it would be both, is my personal feeling.
okay. And then again, just to clarify, if you know it or not, but is the reason too that some of the things outlined in the draft ordinance potentially couldn't be a condition of an approval of a conditional use? Because I guess I should rephrase that. So is there any reason why, excuse me, as part of conditional use review, they couldn't say that you need to have a fire inspection, Division of Fire Safety has to sign off on it, you have to have a local contact. I mean, are there things in the ordinance that are being
They were
proposed?
focusing on V1, V2, and rural residential, excluding Con 1, which I believe is a conditional use.
Well, right now, Con 1 is prohibited in the
Oh,
zoning
Con 2,
bylaw.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Con 1 and Con 2 are both prohibited in the zoning bylaws right now.
For
So
a-
that,
Okay, so
that,
it's happening in Con, the lower elevation, Con 1?
and not legally.
Right.
If it's happening in Con 1, yeah, it's not happening legally. Right now, if you're in Village 1, Village 2, or Rural Res, regardless of the district, it's still a conditional use.
Conditional use.
Yeah, so, so anybody who's doing it under our zoning needs to come and get a conditional use permit to have the use. And as part of that, they go before the DRB and the DRB issues them the permit, which has the conditions set forth around occupancy, parking, all that kind of stuff.
I guess the registry would be the difference, right? That an ordinance could help develop a registry so we know how many short-term rentals are in Montgomery with, and how it is right now, we don't have
So
that information.
So the difference, I guess, then would be that zoning is complaint driven. We don't go around looking for zoning violations.
Mm-hmm.
It's not Ellen's job. So the difference is that with the ordinance in place, there'd be the enforcement individual as described, whose duty would be to basically mine all the platforms to figure out how many of these and where, as opposed to under zoning, there's no mechanism for that. Is that a correct way to
Yeah,
frame it?
that's correct definition.
Okay. Questions from board members or follow-ups or points on the draft? I'm gonna get a glass of water real quick, sorry. Feel free to.
I would like some. ask you a minute ago that I was about to come, if I'm being
I appreciate how much more work has been put into this from like the original proposal and just the detail to
Okay.
which you've taken it. It's definitely clarified a lot of questions that I had originally.
Yeah, it was the balance of trying to keep it like an easy read for somebody to pick it up and know what's happening, but then have the backup, like the statute to back it up, it was a tricky line for us to figure out
Barry
how.
had researched it,
Right.
a lot of issues around it, and cited statute supporting this type of proposal. And honestly, a few of us felt it didn't have quite enough meat on it originally. Like, it didn't have any meat barely on it. This has, I think, sufficient description for you to consider.
And then Barry also did find a couple clerical mistakes we made after we sent out the draft, so at some point when you guys are ready, it's,
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily mistakes, it was just a better wording to understand it.
Yep.
The meaning was the same, it was just easier to read.
Yep.
So the inspections are all voluntary, it's not like there's a fire or health inspector going into the units themselves?
No, where we,
after, for over 8, if
Okay.
it's under 8, it would be a self-compliance form to fill out, but
Right.
over 8, then a fire inspector would.
Okay,
And was there anything behind the 8 number?
I think just size mostly, but that is, I'm pretty sure that was pulled from Killington.
Okay, yeah, I saw, I just didn't know if there was, because some of these things, I was just curious, like, what was the number based on?
I'm pretty sure that was a Killington number.
Because that would be a 3-bedroom rental, right? Yep. The other question, just again, nothing wrong with it, but the registrations run from November 1 to October 30th. Was there a reason why it would run from November through the end of October and not like on the fiscal year or the calendar year
I
or?
think we were thinking about rental, like that winter tends to be busier and then everybody would be in line for the winter rental, but I think that's open to if you would rather do it on a fiscal year or a calendar year, whatever's good.
Yeah.
Comment on that, just the first week of November here, if people are going to be expected to be coming in and doing anything, when it's tax
For tax
day
season.
would be
Not the right time.
not ideal.
Okay,
Yeah, and I guess,
maybe a fiscal year would be better because I would imagine January isn't ideal for renters, that it's like the middle of the holiday season and stuff, so the fiscal year might be the best way to.
so it could also be where if we did it earlier in the year, if November is when things ramp up, if we did it earlier, it would give people time before the heavy season maybe.
Yeah, even September, October is
Yeah.
Fairly quiet.
that there's not, just not that in November, please.
And then is the permit under this framework, right? So under this framework, there'd be the short-term rental agent, person, whatever is appointed to this. Their job is to essentially create the registry by going online and making a list of everything. And then that person would then reach out to the individuals to establish compliance, and then that person would then issue the permit to the property owner. Like that.
I think that you were talking about that happening with Ellen.
No, the Ellen is in charge for enforcing zoning. The Ellen has some tips and like, I think she'd be very helpful in what the compliance officer's role would be, but it wouldn't be enforced by zoning. It would be because, or ordinances, the zoning administration, the zoning administrator is not in charge of enforcing ordinance.
So compliance officer Charlie would, his primary initial function would be to make short-term rental people aware of the ordinance,
Yeah,
and then have them register.
and then they would issue
The-
the permit after demonstration of compliance with all the, okay.
Mhm.
Safety accreditations or whatever.
And then just to be clear on the process there, it would essentially be the permit would be issued simply based on a checklist, right? If you meet criteria 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're good to go. And I wanna make that differentiating between like the DRB process, because like when you go before the DRB for conditional use review, you essentially present your case, you make all your points, the DRB then deliberates and then issues its opinion. But that's more of like a deliberative body issuing an opinion based on the body's discussions of things, whereas this sounds like the, what I'm trying to get, I'm getting to the point where the short-term rental agent doesn't have, there's no choice, there's no
Yeah.
discretion.
We were trying to
If
take the
you-
It's
discretion
an
out.
objective process rather than a subjective
Yeah.
process. Their role would be to make sure that the
That you're
landowner is
complying.
complying and as such would then be issued the permit.
Mhm.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
And then our hope was that the registration fee would cover the cost of having this new role
Position.
in town.
And so to the role and the fee and the cost, so just to be clear, like the FY '23 budget doesn't have anything in there for this. So we'd have to work with Aaron to say, look, if we are gonna do this, how do we structure it financially? Because there's no money to pay for the position. I understand that as people registered, money would come in
Come
and
in.
there'd be money potential to support it, but there could also be a significant gap in time between when you generate revenue. Was the $250 fee just something that you pulled from like Killington, or was there a thought process behind
Now,
that?
we discussed what is the population of short-term rental, and estimates vary pretty widely, because it's hard to define. You know, sometimes it's just one room in a house out in the middle of the woods, and you don't know about it. But they ranged anywhere from 120 to 200, I think, in our discussions. And so what we were looking to do was generate a reasonable registration fee. $250 we felt was reasonable in light of the income generated by these short-term rentals, like a mean income, if you will,
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
and the cost of a compliance officer.
And how it is written of a $250 fee initially, that was, we had in mind the fee would be an annual registration fee, but then it's in the note in the bottom that the select board could change the fee depending on what's needed to cover costs of the compliance officer, and we wrote it that way. Not that it would be a one-time registration fee and then you're good to go forever. We were just trying to give you guys the ability to adapt it as needed easily.
Okay. Because there is a $100 fee associated with the conditional use approval as well. So hypothetically, year one, you could have a $350 fee. Year two, it could be $250.
Yep.
So Sue's got her hand up. Sue, did you wanna?
Yeah, I guess I'm just a little confused. So this compliance officer would find the home, and then they would still have to go through getting a conditional use, correct? They
Yes.
wouldn't just register their place. They'd still, if they're in rural residential, they'd still have to go through conditional use, correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
zoning requires that.
Did you hear that, Sue?
No,
Yeah. Yes. As proposed, it would go through both processes.
okay. And could the compliance officer work it the same way as the dog officer? You know, like what Linda does with her census is we know there are certain places that have short-term rentals that are not, they don't have conditional use, you know, but we know that they're doing it. could they just go, could the compliance officer just go there and I don't understand how you're gonna get this registry.
I mean, we'd probably have to work out the process, but I think hypothetically, the compliance officer would probably notify the property owner in writing,
To start with.
I would imagine, and then based on that, do a site visit. I mean, the thing with these is that if you go to a short-term rental, you're probably not gonna meet the property owner there, right? You're gonna meet a renter.
Yes.
So yeah, but I think, but you're pointing out, Sue, that we'd have to define a process by which the compliance officer would work.
And I think speaking with Ellen about it, that just having informal conversations with her, she definitely had good ideas of how to have it be an educational role also, that,
Okay.
Seems like it would have to be a process similar to the census that Linda conducts.
Yeah.
Yes, it's similar.
Right.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
Would there be some sort of fee structure for non-compliance?
yes,
So
Absolutely.
they'd be fined and,
Established by
the
the select board.
select board.
and then the compliance officer would be in charge of collecting those, AKA not the treasurer?
Yes, I would say that would make sense.
Okay, great.
Yeah. A couple minor things. Number 11, there'd be a language tweak there just to make sure that it doesn't conflict with zoning. Right now it says STRs are only permitted in V1, V2 rural res and are prohibited in COM1 and COM2.
That reflects what zoning is right
Well, they're
now.
technically conditionally, they're not
Oh,
it's not a,
permitted use,
it's
it's
a
a
conditional
conditional
use,
use.
not a permit.
Okay,
And to the subject of this paper, it makes sense. It's permitted under this framework, but just so that things line up, it's a minor thing.
As you work on sort of edits and whatnot in this, I think that number 3, where it says the fee structure shall be $250 initially, I think that the note from the bottom where it's talking about a registration fee adequate to cover the administration and compliance, like to be scheduled annually, I think that that should be part of number 3 as well, so that it does not get overlooked. And possibly even that second note about a fee schedule for compliance should be in that as well, so that that's all covered in one place.
okay.
So sorry, I want to just capture that. You're saying roll what into 3?
I'm saying roll the
Note
notes,
number 1.
note number 1 and note number 2, just about the fee structures, all under number 3.
Yeah, very good.
To make it a little cleaner, note number 2, it's not a fee schedule, it's a, what's the word, I'm looking- not fine, it's a synonym for fine.
Penalty,
Huh?
penalty?
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a penalty schedule,
Okay, so
and
then,
also a waiver fee, penalty schedule and waiver fee.
I guess that language would just need, if that's the language you wanna use, that would need to be changed.
Okay.
No, we never discussed waiver fee as a commission.
Well, it's part of the law regarding ordinances, part of the
We have to
statute.
give them a waiver
I'm
option.
not sure that you have to, but I don't know of any
Is that
town
in
that
the actual
doesn't.
ordinance? I don't see where the waiver language is in the.
It isn't, it's.
Oh, under the
Gary's
notes.
just-
I got you.
Yeah, under the
Okay.
notes,
Yeah, yeah,
Gary's
yeah.
just bringing up that there may need to, that
I got
language
you.
may need
I
to
got you.
exist in there as
Instead of-
well.
We're
Instead
gonna
of
plug
fee
in some
schedule.
new language
Yeah.
on a couple of points.
Okay.
Basically saying the same thing,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
clear.
Perfect,
Um,
thank you.
Is overnight, or sorry,
so I guess one question I've got is like, we do this, we have a violation, we have a multiple violation, which puts us under like 12F. And so we either revoke their permit or they're in violation. Is our recourse then to
The revoke is to go after a scofflaw. Somebody who just says, I'm not registering, I'm not, I'm not doing anything, et cetera. Or they have a permit, they're permitted to have 6 guests and they're constantly having
Yeah.
9, 12, 15 who are partying all night. That's just the way to deal with that.
Yeah. And then our recourse would be, I guess, the same as under zoning. We would fine them according to the fee schedule
Yeah.
and then eventually have to take them to court to recoup the,
Yeah. Or to get an injunction for them to stop doing it. Then if they keep doing it, then they're in contempt of court.
okay. Because we don't have the ability to delist these.
Don't have the ability to,
Not to delist them, I mean, I can't call up Airbnb and say, hey,
no,
yeah,
can't do
you
that,
gotta
but.
take them off there. Okay. Did you have a question about?
Oh, yeah, just on number 9, with the overnight on-street parking is not permitted. Is that something like reasonably, I understand the premise of it, but like if there's no parking restrictions on the street designated by the town or the state on their main streets, can't we realistically limit that in an ordinance?
I mean, we have a parking ordinance which
We
governs
do.
parking, and I mean, my take is number 9 doesn't belong in here. 9's a parking thing. If we want to deal with parking, it should be dealt with under a parking ordinance. And the owner of the vehicle doesn't matter who the owner of the vehicle is. It's a vehicle parked someplace. It should be parked within the bounds of our ordinance.
Right,
I mean, that's my take on it.
so maybe just rewording this to simply just reflect what's in our ordinance as permitted, you know what I mean?
You could reflect the ordinance, strike it. I mean, there's
Yeah.
different ways you could handle it, but I think that strictly saying that short-term rental guests can't park on the street is, I mean, in my opinion, a little, I don't know.
And
Sue's
Sue's
waving.
waving a lot.
Yeah, Sue, go ahead. Go ahead, Sue.
Okay, in the last few decisions that we've done, for instance, we had one on, the corner of 118 and Big Nosh Farm Road. We put in there is no parking on the road, whether it's Big Nosh Farm Road or 118. They have to park on the property. We tell them how many parking spaces they're required to have. And we've done this on the last maybe 5 or 6 that we've done. We do put
So
restrictions on parking.
can I ask you though, Sue, are those, when you have those discussions, does the fact of where the property is located, what street it's on, is it on a corner, do those factors weigh on your decision about parking?
When they're on a, like a paved road, like the Big Nosh Farm Road or 118. The barn on 118 there on Main Street. There's no parking on the street for the short-term rentals. We make them park on the property and we make sure that they know how mmany parking spaces they have to have.
Okay, I guess my point is more back to the whole deliberative thing versus a checklist. It's because my understanding is the DRB takes into account the property itself, the situation of the property,
Yes.
how big the driveway is. And
Yes.
under this scenario, that then puts a power, onus, ability on the compliance officer to then make subjective decisions around the approval of an application like this. Does that make sense?
Well, the compliance officer wouldn't be making the decision, the DRB would, right?
Again, but that's a different process than what we're talking about here.
So possibly in the registration process, the permitting process that we're discussing here, the number of parking spots that the DRB has granted needs to be listed somewhere within their application, and those things need to
Yes.
match.
Yes,
I
yes.
think that would take care of both ends of it, right? So the DRB is looking at the safety and they're having the deliberative process, whereas this is more of a black and white process and it's not subjective, so we
You
could,
would relate one to the other.
one would have to be the same as the other.
Sue,
Right.
how do you determine how many cars per property? Or do you?
The number of bedrooms,
Okay.
determines the amount of overnight parking, that we require. So it's not based on the number of people sleeping, because people sleep in sleeping bags, they bring a blow-up mattress. We go on the number of bedrooms, and basically that's how we do it.
Okay. Okay, so there's some things there that get ironed out with parking as far as whether it's tagged to the DRB, conditional use approval, or something else. I guess
Right, there was a property out on South Main Street, was the old Soden property, by the Hutchins Bridge there.
Mhm.
Anyway, we required them to have 10 parking spaces because of the nature of their rental. And so, anyway, they were required, they had to have at least 10 parking spaces on the property.
Okay.
Did they have 10 bedrooms, Sue?
I'm sorry?
Did they have 10 bedrooms?
They had I think they had seven bedrooms, because it's a multi-family dwelling. So it was, it's like, it originally was a house, an apartment, or two apartments, a house and two apartments. But then the owners just made it into a short-term rental with the whole house. So we figured it out, and they had enough to do 10 parking spaces.
Yeah.
Okay.
They had enough property
Okay.
to do the 10, so.
Okay.
I guess I just personally I have a little bit of an issue in saying that a short-term rental owner, a guest there, can't park on the street, but if you're staying at the inn or the Phineas or the coach house or you can park on the street as long as you're not in violation of our parking ordinance.
What is the parking ordinance about overnight parking?
You can't park in the traveled lane. I mean, I don't have it in front of me, but like there's an ordinance that talks about enforcement of it as an issue because we lack enforcement capability. But anyway,
Is it prohibited overnight? If you're not in a lane of travel?
no, you can park on the street overnight as
There's
long as you.
limitations in winter of plowing.
There's limitation in the winter. There's limitations in where you can park in the center in the village because of plowing, but you can park on the street overnight in the center in the village per the ordinance. There's no restriction on that as long as you're not in the travel corridor. You also can't park on the sidewalk. Well, I mean, like, we could say that if you have a parking lot, like, behind your restaurant, you actually require your guests to park, like, in the parking lot behind your restaurant and not on the sidewalk. I mean, we could have a whole discussion about that, but,
Somebody should be here who isn't for that discussion.
yeah, well, I mean, it's not just that hypothetical restaurant, it's others too, but, it's a bigger discussion than just this. The other one that always kind of irks me a little bit is number 10, which is no outdoor activity permitted after 10 or before 7. I think outdoor activity is a very broad word, and again, I feel like if we're gonna have noise stuff, we should have a noise ordinance. We shouldn't just peg it right to a short-term rental. I mean, if we're gonna let other activities happen in town after 10 p.m. but tell one activity they can't, it doesn't seem fair. I get the intent behind it, and I do think to some degree it might be assuaged a little bit by having a local contact whereby, a neighbor knowing my place is rented by Joe and Jill, I can call Joe and Jill at 11 o'clock and be like, hey, get your ass down here and tell them to shut the fuck up. I mean,
Quiet down.
sorry. Been thinking about the post office too much. Anyway, so I think, but anyway, that's one area where I might So anything else? Oh, Sue, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
Muted.
We state the quiet time is from 11 to 6, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. I think it was, and we just call it quiet time.
Okay.
You know, that's,
Not very enforceable.
I mean, they don't want rowdy parties, going on, that's, anyway, we do have quiet time in our decisions.
Sounds very peaceful.
The only other question I had.
Probably should match.
I had
mean,
one
if they're
more,
saying 11 to 6, that should probably,
Well,
Quiet time.
Or
that should,
there's some things here too that can just mirror your conditional use approval.
yeah,
The one other question I had was,
read a story to them.
does the definition of unit in here, I can't find the exact place, but the definition of unit, as I read it, would mean that if I have a house like Sue Reagan's house, which I think are all still long-term rentals, but she's got multiple units in the same house. So does she, under that scenario, have to pay a $250 fee for each of the 4 bedrooms and each of the 3 studio apartments? Yeah, go.
My interpretation of it is a unit is what would be rented to one set. So if it has a bathroom and a kitchen and a bedroom, that's a unit. So if you have a person who has a triplex, say, and also they're taking in guests in their house, in their unit, that would be 1. And if they're renting each of the 2 other apartments, that's 3 units.
So basically, it can't just be a bedroom, it has to have a bathroom and a kitchen associated with it to make it a unit?
How I interpret it is that each party that you rent to, so how you're saying it, each one would be an individual unit.
So in that case,
1 bedroom is
So-
1 unit.
conversely, if Sarita is advertising rooms at the coach house on Airbnb,
Yes,
does that mean that Sarita has to pay a $200 fee
for each.
for each
For each
one?
unit.
And the same goes for,
But
I wanna say, like-
then when does the bed and breakfast line, if you're more than 3 units, then you register with the state, right? Isn't that the line for bed and breakfast? If you serve food or you have more than 3 units, then you need to fall under the state regulations, I believe.
it could be, I don't know, but that's something we'll have to figure out. Because the way this is written, as I read it, it meant that every single unit in a building, including a bedroom, could be considered a unit, which would bring the fee.
If you're renting individually, so you're getting
But we need-
$100 a
It needs to
night.
have a definition.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure 3 is the line that the state wants to regulate, and then you have to follow whatever the state's lodging establishment
Okay.
codes are.
Because the coach house was the one that caught my eye there, because they don't offer breakfast or food. I think some of them have kitchenettes in them.
Well, we were talking, I don't think we ever made it clear in the language, but a way that something that's already getting regulated from the state and is a lodging establishment, even though if they might, it gets to a gray area, even though they might advertise on Airbnb or another short-term rental platform, but if the state's regulating them, then the state regulation would supersede the town regulation.
Okay. We'll just have to make clear where that tipping point occurs and what makes you
I'm
fall
pretty,
under that
I
versus
think the
this.
state definition, like the state has a definition for lodging establishments, and I'm quite sure there was something about more than 3 units and serving food.
Okay. There, yeah.
Might want to make it so that if a party has a state permit, then they're exempt from it. If they're required to have a state permit, but they don't, which could be the case, I don't know, then they would come under our ordinance.
Okay. So I do want to just flag that it's 7:30 and we do have a lot of other stuff to cover tonight. Any other feedback from the board, other notes from the board?
Just maybe putting some reference somewhere in here refer to the zoning, what was the word, it was the compliance, zoning compliance form or.
Or the conditional use.
Conditional use permit, thank you.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
there's
yeah.
multiple things in here that could reference the CU approval.
Yeah.
And if you guys could write to us.
Yes,
And after, just so we have for our next meeting and not just our memory.
Yeah,
would be great.
I've tried to capture all the notes on the doc here,
Okay.
so I will email this and a summary of this to you guys if you
Okay.
One more thing.
Yeah, Barry, go ahead.
In an email that I saw, you were questioning the relationship between zoning and ordinance in this regard. You know, can we do both?
Yeah,
Yeah, I believe so.
okay,
Because our zoning ordinance does not use the term short-term rental.
okay.
It just broadly, okay.
I think we covered that at the beginning, I think,
Okay.
with these guys, so. Okay, so we'll email you this back. I think the process here would be that you guys can take the comments that we've given you, work on them as long as you see fit. At some point, if we're gonna move forward with an ordinance, we'd wanna warn a meeting specifically around adoption of the ordinance and do a little bit more outreach around this, because
You would probably wanna get our next draft back before
Oh, yeah.
then, though.
100%. I'd want to have a full ordinance drafted that we can put on the website for a couple weeks, you know.
Yep.
Yep, okay, cool. Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So it's 7:30. If it's okay, can we just quickly pivot to new business, item A, which was Wendy's request? Shouldn't take too long. That way Wendy and Tosca can get out, and then we'll work through Aaron's stuff. Okay, thanks. Sorry.
Oh, this is fine.
So with no objection, we're gonna move to new business, item A. So, as I said, Wendy sent us a letter here. Again, the main meat of it's the first part of the letter. I'm writing to request that you please put into a document any verification of the town's ownership or not of the property at 10 Mountain Road, Montgomery Center, AKA the parsonage. This would include any information that you gave this property to anyone. So the ask is that we just draft a letter saying that we have no ownership interest now or in the past for the parsonage. I think it's easy enough to draft it. I mean, we don't. I will say that everything else happening with that is not the board's purview. So I don't want to get into that at all, but is it okay? Any discussion on this? Is it okay if we draft a letter stating that the town of Montgomery, the formal entity, the municipality of Montgomery, does not now, nor have we ever had a ownership of that building?
Yep.
Yeah?
I think it's fine.
Okay. I will make a motion to draft letter to that regard. To make it formal, is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
All right, any discussion on the motion? All right, if not, we'll vote. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? One abstention? Okay, great.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Me too.
All right, let's work through all the things on Aaron's list. And maybe do the town garage restructuring last in the chance that Mark shows up.
Yes, we can totally do that. The first one's super easy. It's the drug and alcohol policy for commercial motor vehicle operators that needs to be part of their files. It was discussed and revised, and it just was never signed. When I made those packets for everybody to have this, because they need to sign that they've received these, I couldn't find the signed by all of you. So here's the final, if you wouldn't mind
Okay.
throwing some signatures on that guy. Then I can just get everybody to sign it and put it in their personal
Awesome.
folders.
Did you get all their paperwork back?
I did not. I did get one of them back.
You got, whose package did you get back?
Mark Cheese.
Mark Chief, okay.
The listers have asked, this may take us into purchasing policy territory, but they are looking to spend some money above above the $1,000 cap and above what's going to be their budgeted amount. They're in need of getting some maps redone. It's like a multi-year commitment kind of thing. So I guess I need to know when things like this come across my desk, what you would like me to do with them. I can make it pretty with their budget and where their status is and all of that stuff and leave it for you to discuss. But this was the first one that's come through the process.
Yep.
On the front end, so it was a good example. I need to have you guys either approve it or not approve it so they can move on with their project. And B, how would you like me to handle these going forward?
I mean, I'd say that the way you're doing it, flagging it for us as being, you know, a purchasing policy thing that needs to be approved, and then providing, you know, what their current budget status is, where they're at, and how it would impact it, is just the way that we should.
Perfect.
In the future.
So I'll just have a separate folder, like the warrant folder, just a separate, like, these
Purchasing
need to
policy.
be approved, and
Yep.
then they can go on a warrant for the next meeting.
Yep.
Excellent. So this one, I will leave for you guys to approve, or
Great.
disapprove
And so-
this evening.
And this is the Cartographic Technologies, Inc., GIS tax mapping and programming. So CTI, so just to back up, the listers have not been happy with the company that we are currently working with, which is why they want to move. The current fixed costs to be spread over 2 years is $4,407. The not to exceed costs for 2021 and 22, now 22, 23. So is that fiscal year 23? Or calendar year?
This is fiscal year 23, so they'll,
So when they say the not to exceed costs for 21, 22, does that mean our fiscal year 23, or does it mean calendar year 2021, 22 versus 2020?
they must be talking calendar year because they're still in their 21, 22.
Well,
No,
now it's
she's off here.
subsequently 22, 23.
Right, I wonder, she may have prepared this before June, I wonder, thinking they were gonna have it until last year, which wouldn't make any sense. But it would need to be not to exceed costs for 22, 23, because they're asking for approval of this budget year.
Yeah.
And then the next year would be 23, 24 would be the following payment.
So then the not to exceed costs for this fiscal year would be the $1,198. And then the 4,407 would be spread across this budget cycle and next budget cycle?
She's saying our cost for this year would be 340150.
I see down here, okay.
And she's also said that that was wicked unclear. At first, they thought they were gonna be within their 1,600 because of how that was laid out, but yes, they're
Okay.
breaking out the total.
So for this fiscal year, they're looking for $3,401.50.
Right.
And what does their
So
budget currently have for
they've got
mapping?
1,600 budgeted currently, but they're expecting with Linda getting done, and they don't usually hit their payroll numbers anyway. So they're expecting that they're gonna have plenty of room in their payroll numbers to make up for it. And also their education budget, they don't foresee any trainings, which they've got $500 in there that they are willing to chip in towards it too.
Okay. So, as treasurer, knowing where they are with their budget and looking at this proposal, do you have a recommendation to the board as to?
I feel like they will be fine, and I think the recommendation would be to let them go ahead and move forward.
Okay. Great. Any questions from the board on that? Okay, hearing none, then is there a motion to approve the contract with Cartographic Technologies, Inc.?
I'll make the motion to approve the contract with CTI.
Great, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Great. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, motion carries. Does this need a signature?
Does
No.
this actually need a signature on it? Do you have somewhere that you want us to initial that?
Sure that the former formal board adoption in the minutes doesn't cover that? Because most of our policies, we adopt the policy and then it's dated, and then that's just the policy, isn't
It's
it?
not on, in the record with a signed date. It's the last thing I could find in the minutes was where it was discussed and tabled for revisions.
Okay,
And then I found a couple of emails with the revisions, and then I didn't see it back on there.
okay.
If it is, I'm sorry, that I didn't find
No, that's
it,
fine.
but I
We
don't
might have never
think-
formally adopted it.
I'd rather be safe than sorry.
Barry, do you have a?
I think it would be a good policy, if not absolutely required by law, that when you vote on a document, that a copy of the document as voted on be attached to the minutes.
I think that is
I
actually
think
the
that's
law.
typically how it goes.
Yeah.
It typically gets recorded immediately, and that's why when we weren't finding that, and we
Yeah,
we're going back
okay.
to the minutes, I'm 99.9%.
We're working on that search function within the website to be able to find those things
Oh
in the
my
minutes and the
gosh.
agendas so that we're not spending hours
Oh, amazing.
being inefficient. So do you actually, going back to this, do you actually want a signature on page 16, which is the last page?
Well, I think what we need to do is actually just
Formally
formally
adopt
adopt
it.
it and record it with the minutes.
Okay,
Great. So I would make a motion to formally adopt the Town of Montgomery drug and alcohol policy for CMV operators.
Great. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Great. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, motion carries. And I'll put a big note, record with minutes.
Thank you.
I think you are correct, Barry, and just something that we need to keep in mind when we do that kind of stuff. I think legally you are correct too. All right, cool.
Very quick bond bank update for the refinance for all of the water system loans. We formally withdrawn from the bond bank for this season because we officially were not going to save any money by the time we paid our lawyers. So our application luckily, doesn't need to be redone ever. So when interest rates are more in our favor, then we can just tell them that we wanna go back in for the pool. So I just wanted to
Okay,
update that. I have a very quick, our IT services, they upped our price and it irritated me, so, cause we have a service agreement with them and it's not anything that needs to necessarily happen tonight, but I'd like to put out an RFP for IT services. I mocked one up if you guys wanna look at it. I mean, they upped it $46 a month, which isn't the end of the world, but it's enough that it's like time to reevaluate,
Yeah.
so
okay.
there's that. So the last
So
couple,
can I just to formally, I mean,
Yeah.
I think if you and the town office are the ones that deal with that primarily, so, I mean, I would just say, I would move to give Aaron the approval to release an RFP for IT services.
awesome, thank you.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Great, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great.
I think I said aye in my head.
I thought I heard. All right,
Okay, Parking lot invoices.
Ah, Jesus.
Everybody ready? We have a few that need to be, work their way through the purchasing policy that didn't work their way through the purchasing policy ahead of time, but I need them approved. I can't pay them unless they are. So it's not ideal, but I need minutes that reflect that they're approved to be paid.
How
Yeah.
far over budget are we on this project?
$29,826.32.
So there is one, I wish Mark was here to recognize,
I know.
I share your frustration. And I am 100% with you. There is one part of that though.
You can tell I'm frustrated.
Yeah, there is one part of that though that I did want to clarify today is the initial quote we got from Hungerford. There was a part of that that basically said, you know, price is subject to change due to material costs, and so the $30,000 overrun, it's not totally attributed to that, but there is overrun that was just
$4,846.82.
okay, so about $5
because of
grand.
that.
So
The rest of it is.
So we're still $25,000 over budget.
What's the rest
So I
of it,
can
Erin?
still be $25,000 frustrated.
So we budgeted 65,000. The end bill from Hungerford for the paving all by itself was 66,946.82. So it was already blown before it started, basically.
you just said one time we budgeted
65,000
Total.
total.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
That's what we discussed a couple meetings ago.
Hungerford bill came in at what?
66,946.82. Their original quote was 62,100.
Yeah.
So the rest is a lot of materials. The fabric was really expensive, that was on top of all of the ledge.
Which
There was
is
a lot of-
something that didn't come through as a,
These are all ones that should have come via purchasing policy is what you're covering. Yeah.
I mean, one of the bills for the road fabric was $952, but it's like, it's in here because I could place 5 orders that are $952,
Yeah.
but one of them was $25.35, it's like for $24.35. Yeah, there was a lot of, St. Ange's did some trucking at the end of June. So there was paying them for trucking. There was Avery's bill was $68.92.50. Part of that was paying them trucking of some of the stone.
are you highlighting the trucking because the trucking is something that we could have done as a town and
Presumably, I mean,
Yeah.
it's
given that we
not,
have trucks?
I wish Mark was here to
I know, me too.
answer these questions.
I waited as long as I could.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, we need to talk about it.
We
and,
do, I need
yeah.
to at least get these people paid, because it's not their fault.
So just to process-wise, the stack you've got that need to be approved per the purchasing policy, is there a warrant we have to sign or sign
I have
each one of them?
Most
or
of
like-
them on one warrant, just my own process, because I'd already done them ahead of time. There's a couple that trickled in afterwards. There was a bill that just came in from St. Ange's today for $500 for renting their roller, so that's so it's just on a regular warrant, though it's part of the parking lot project. But this warrant is items that are over. And I wasn't sure about, like, the Hungerford invoice itself. I feel like that's presumably approved because it was the project, whatever, but because it's over, I still think it needs to go through this process.
Yeah,
We accepted that bid, so.
yeah.
Right,
So the Hungerford,
so I think the Hungerford one is fine.
Hungerford's fine.
Yeah, so it's just the Avery's is the only other one that's not on a warrant, it's just sitting by itself. But I think what we'll need for minutes is approved to spend X amount of dollars to this vendor for this project,
Oh,
or
seriously?
something, I know.
We need the individual, that's one of the questions that just came up is, we talked about board approval in the purchasing policy, and you gotta go back and look at what that means in there. I don't know if there's any definition of board approval, whether it's
I think somebody,
motion to approve?
ideally, I think if there is a select board liaison to the town clerk's office and there, when something like this comes in, if you can designate that person to approve it. I mean,
I don't know,
I don't know. It kind of like, things like this, like, need to be discussed as a whole board
yeah, no,
because
yeah,
it's
that-
super important.
You can't have one person do that, it's just
No,
that's the point
so
of
I don't know if,
policy.
like, if I made you, like, if I instead of, or I could put them on a warrant. That's not hard. It's just,
Like, what
I
if
feel
we-
like they need to, well,
So
after
yeah,
the fact, I could put them on a warrant. Theoretically, that's not how it's supposed to work. It's supposed to be like, you can hire Avery's, here's the quote from Avery's. They're quoting $6,000 to do this parking lot work. You authorize spending up to 7 because who knows what happens when you approve that quote. But I mean, invoices, I don't even know what's a good example, because under like, the materials are technically under like the blanket purchase.
Yeah.
But like because of spending $10,000 at Leach's here, we're getting close to that 15,000 annual where we need to go and actually like say, hey, is the Tedros pit cheaper? Or hey, can we get it from,
okay.
but
process-wise, is there a way where between meetings, when something comes in for board approval, can we create like a separate warrant that has all of the purchasing items on it? Or is there a way?
theoretically, I don't have an invoice if it's gone through the process properly. It's an ahead of the time purchase
Oh, that's right, we're
request.
approving the.
Like you're approving the quote for the parcel mapping.
Before the
Yeah, you're totally right. I'm just trying to think of how we can avoid having to make.
Me too, and I want it to be as easy as possible, like even if that means like I throw them all together in a folder with a spreadsheet on the front that says, here's this, here's the budget attached to each invoice, like I don't mind doing that, it doesn't take a lot of time. And I mean, this is, just happens to be like a prime example right at the beginning of
Yeah.
the budget year, right after this policy is adopted, so it's like,
So we need to, okay.
find an easy process.
So the issue with this is really the Public Works Department. I mean, there's the issue, and granted, it makes sense, because that's where most of our expenditures come from, there's costly work, so that's where we're gonna have this issue. So I think what we need to do is have this conversation with Mark in the room, and or whoever we hire as a road foreman. So I kinda wanna just like, for now, just put a pin in that conversation, because we can have that tonight, but without Mark in the room, we're gonna have it again.
It's true.
For tonight's purposes, can we make a blanket motion to approve the
Oh, you know.
quotes pertinent to the paving project that were subject to the purchasing policy?
This
Paving project
warrant,
purchasing policy.
the warrants have numbers on them, so this particular warrant, I think you could approve as a blanket. Warrant number 1457 dated August 3rd. I think that would be fine. And I don't expect an entire packet of warrants worth of stuff to come in
Yeah,
that
yeah.
breaks the purchasing policy.
What was that warrant? Warrant what?
1457,
Dated,
August 3rd. Totals 28,443.87. Not all parking lot, there are a couple of other things on here that just.
so expenditures, we'll just say expenditures
all from the same department.
related to
Correct.
purchasing policy. So if the motion was, and just to be clear, I don't know if we said this outright, but this is important because if the auditors look back and don't see this stuff in the minutes, we could get screwed.
Right, because the auditor, they read all of the minutes,
Yeah.
they're gonna read through, they're gonna see that the purchasing policy was adopted, they're gonna ask me to pull the purchasing policy as soon as they get here, actually before they get here, they're gonna have me send it to them, I'm very sure, but I'm waiting for it. And then they're gonna look from then on, and they're gonna pull these invoices, and they're gonna say, where is that approved in the minutes, can you show me?
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna say, I'm
Okay,
not gonna send out a check that isn't signed
Yeah.
off on ahead of time, because I know the repercussions.
so I just want to make that clear to everybody.
Yeah.
That, like, this
Yeah,
isn't
this
just,
isn't
this
just,
isn't just us creating busy work, it's because
No.
the,
No.
the auditors can come back and get us.
no, this is like reeling in expenditures and like having these like to spark these conversations is like super important, and it's,
Yeah.
it's all good. It's just finding a process that's not gonna be super cumbersome for you guys and also not hold up, like, I mean, there's an emergency purchase provision, like if something's like
Yeah.
super broken or whatever, but just to start working through it, I
Yeah.
guess.
So then tonight, just to read it back, the motion to cover our rear on this would be to approve warrant 1457 dated August 3rd, 2022, totaling $28,443.87, covering expenditures related to the purchasing policy. Does that work for?
That works, then we'll just have to do Avery's separate, because that's the other one that's, the only other one that's not in there.
Okay.
Barry.
Oh yeah, Barry, go ahead.
Just a suggestion, every state contract that I've looked at has pages and pages of boilerplate of policy just to cover their butt. And it might be a good idea, whatever your purchasing policy is to include that in a contract. So a vendor is on notice that they can't go spend money, you know, in a manner that's contrary to what's in the
Yeah.
contract.
They're supposed to get all of that, like, hiring a contractor to come in, you're supposed to, any of us that want to hire a contractor to come in and do anything, we're supposed to have proof of insurance from them, a non-employee work agreement specifically saying what they need to do, and you know, if a truck's broken down and you need to have, let's go plow out this thing, like, at the spur of the moment, like, sure, but if they're going to take on the entire thing, like, they need to provide us with the correct paperwork, and that's like where this is heading towards. This is like the first step in like actually like going through with all that paperwork.
We need to get our house in order before we deal with contractors' houses.
I know. We're getting good.
So again, I think this is a conversation we need to dig into more, but we need to dig into it with the road commissioner present.
Yeah.
So for now, again, I think the motion on the table will be to approve warrant 1457 dated 8/3/22, total $28,443.87, covering expenditures related to the purchasing policy as presented by the treasurer. Is there a motion to that effect? I will make that.
I'll make that motion as read.
Okay, I will second the motion. And now, only one of us can vote in the negative just to make a point. I'm just gonna put that out there.
Is that specifically for me?
I'm just saying, like, one of us gets to. I'm not gonna say who can, but, all right, any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any objections? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. Thank you. What else is on your docket?
Only
Avery's
because they
invoice
need
now,
to get
please.
paid.
Avery's
It's not their
invoice.
fault.
Yes,
This is still pertinent to the purchasing policy, right?
this is
Okay.
because it didn't follow the purchasing policy, because they were contracted without a quote, and they have now turned in a $6,800 invoice that's above the $1,000 limit.
And what was the quote? They did eventually provide a quote.
I've not.
You've not received that.
What was this for, the parking lot?
Yes.
I thought Avery finally gave him a quote. I literally sat down with him in the
Yes.
garage and said, give him a quote tomorrow for
Yes,
this work.
and they did.
Okay, I never saw it.
Oh, that's fine. I'm
That, I
just-
don't necessarily need to, really, honestly.
Okay,
The
Uh,
quote came
I don't know.
to the meeting. I did not see it.
I don't think it came to me.
It did after the fact, after the work was already done. The quote came.
What is
I don't remember the quote, seeing the quote.
No, nobody saw the quote.
But we know it was in the room?
It
Oh.
was, there was an envelope that I was told was the quote.
Wonder where the envelope ended up.
I don't know.
I checked the select board box.
It's
Like,
not,
there's
that is not a
such
question I
quotes.
can answer.
Not there,
It's
it's not
not.
here either, okay.
Okay.
Anyway, this invoice is for $6,892.50.
I bet that's what the quote was for too.
The one they're writing tomorrow to give us? Okay, so this one needs to be
It's not
approved
funny.
because it was not a version policy.
Yes.
Okay. So the motion would be to approve payment of invoice
6576.
from Avery. Is there a motion to approve the payment of invoice 6576 from Avery?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Begrudgingly.
Do we have a second?
I'll say.
Great.
Well, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah, you still have to get paid.
All right.
It's not their fault.
No.
No, it's
It's
not.
not their fault.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries.
Knowing that Avery's does a lot of work for the town, I think that it would behoove us to make them aware of our purchasing policy going forward so that they know that they need to be submitting a quote, and if they are going over a certain amount, that they need to be not just talking to a singular individual, that they need to be submitting some paperwork for that.
Yeah,
So
that would be good for them, I mean,
I think that communication needs to happen, and then
it
it,
also needs
Before
to
they
be
do
clear
anything.
as a board that those quotes are approved as a board and not as an individual.
What was the full
Yes.
cost of the paving project, you know?
94,826.32.
I will say that it was mentioned at an earlier meeting that we're expecting about 32 grand from FEMA. And when that money comes in, we can formally move to put it somewhere, but just as a small glimmer of something, the FEMA money can potentially make us whole on
cover
this.
asks for money that we already
So,
said that we
That
approved.
answers my next question, which would
Sorry,
be, where
I'm
am I
not
getting
really
this
gonna be
money
able to-
from? So I'm just gonna overrun the project's budget, and then we'll have extra revenue to offset the overrun. For now.
Yep.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else on your?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I thought you were done.
Oh, so I've had a request for a vacation day, is that fine to talk about in open?
Yeah, I think this is fine, and I can just, it's not a contract negotiation, it's basically just taking into account that because of how, I won't use that word again tonight, up our public works department has been over the past 3 years, we've had people working here without contracts because people have come and gone like a revolving door, and Mark never had a contract, for public works director. It's funny, his resignation came almost to the day from him
52 weeks later.
taking the job, so he was here for a year without a contract. He should have been issued a contract. That is the fault of the town. I'll take responsibility that I never prioritized that and got him one. That contract would have had the standard provisions for vacation accrual that we have in all the contracts. Because Mark didn't, there's a question of how we treat vacation time for Mark. And so I guess what I would put out there is that we treat vacation time for Mark the same as we would treat vacation time for any other employee working with a contract in that position. We could technically say, you never had a contract and therefore you don't have vacation time, but this wasn't necessarily a Mark issue. This was an issue of the town not issuing a contract to someone working with us because we never got around to it because we've been trying to figure out what the hell to do with that department for a year. So do you need a formal?
Yes, I didn't do payroll today because it was been requested to use time for last week, so I'll just do it another time. But before I do that, this has been the first actual request to use any of that time. So I guess I need I can't just, like, it would be like on my own adding vacation time if I'm not following a contract. So I just need something to go off of from you guys that allows me to do that.
Okay, so I would move to essentially retroactively provide Mark with the same PTO accrual that is provided to any other employee in that department.
Can I just point out that given I don't know if that can be taken into consideration or not. I don't even know if I should say that. It's delicate. Given that we're talking about an employee that's only has a couple of days left, this, if this time is added, it could potentially, I'd still need to know, because there isn't a contract that states that, like, would this be lost at the end of employment? Would this be paid out? With what?
Our contracts currently don't have any language around payment for PTO that is not used, correct? None of our contracts do. Or do they?
Some of the old ones did, if you did give proper notice. The newest ones do not.
None of them do.
So
These ones
I
we just
think,
signed don't, I don't think so.
right, so I think then, I just want, now that we're talking about it, be super clear, because I know that that's gonna be the next question that I'm asked.
I mean, our issue with our last employee who asked to be paid for PTO when they departed was, the answer was no, because they didn't give any notice.
Because they broke the contract, but these contracts don't have any provision for payout in them at all. So, I mean,
This is a bigger discussion because often payout is capped too, like you can only accrue X number of.
which having
Of
worked
days,
exactly
yeah.
52 weeks and not having taken any of it except for this potentially one day last week, would all be eligible,
Yeah, which is
theoretically.
2 weeks of paid vacation, 3
Great.
weeks of paid vacation. Well, I would still
And
make,
I don't need an answer on
yeah, so,
that tonight.
I'm gonna
The
make the
one day-
motion. So I will make the motion to retroactively provide PTO accrual, which is provided under the, so I'm gonna, Charlie is going to move to retroactively provide PTO accrual under the same framework provided to any other employee of the Public Works Department. Which in this case would provide him the paid day off last week, which he's asking for.
Yes,
And it punts the other issue.
yes.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, motion carries. And we will talk about the other issue if and when it arises. And now, some good news for
What
Mary.
else?
I love you guys and I appreciate all of you.
Appreciate you.
Yes.
I have in my lap loan documentation for a new truck that has the potential to be collected this week because it is done. Also has the potential to not be picked up because there is a provision in the contract of said brand new truck that we have the right to refuse it at the end if we decide not to have it, which was put in there as like if it didn't pass the budget or the town meeting vote, but it's still there. So the loan is for 100,000. We have to come up with 31-ish and change. It's remaining. We have the truck going, the old truck slated to go to Derek for 22. I recommend that we do not pick up this truck. I recommend that we still sell the small truck to Derek for 22,000. Everybody hold on to your chairs. Since there's nobody to drive it, and we've got two guys, we've got two big trucks, and then we would have $22,000 in our pocket that would not have to go towards the payment of the new truck, which we could then use to potentially contract out the small truck plowing for the winter.
Probably have to get a bid for that, huh?
We would definitely get a bid for that. Sorry. So that's a lot.
Mark,
I
why are you not here?
know, I don't care, but anyway.
No, I think it's fine. I asked you to bring this up. I mean, there's a bigger conversation here that we need to have around Public Works Department and what we're doing with that department. And frankly, whether we just dissolve the department and contract out everything. I'm not saying that we should go that direction, but
I'm
given the
recommending
revolving
that
door,
direction.
given the revolving
You
door.
would recommend going in that direction?
Absolutely.
Dissolving the department? Okay. Obviously, like, that's a larger conversation, but I just wanted to
It is.
clarify that that is what you were saying.
I crunched the numbers of trying to hire positions now to try to replace, to try to get a third person in there. The way that we budgeted based off of Mark agreeing to work only 30 hours a week and part of that being covered by the water department has totally screwed our highway payroll number. It's really low. So there's not the ability to hire another person full-time.
At a rate of pay that would compensate them for their
At minimum
experience.
wage.
At minimum.
There's a couple different scenarios that I run, but it's personnel-wise, like rushing into these decisions of hiring people for that department has not served us well at all. It's created a mess and a lot of work and a lot of discussions that nobody wants to have and nobody has time to have. Like,
Yeah.
the thought of removing the personnel part of that department, it's not that we don't have money in that department, we do. The total highway payroll, contracted services, all of those things that we could pull together to have to fund contracting the entire thing out. I'm curious if it's feasible. Like, I'm curious to put it out there to see what a response it would get. Like, I know some people are gonna lose their minds about it, but
I mean, just the fact alone that we have how many people drawing unemployment on us now?
I don't think I can say that specifically, but
Well, you can't say
there
their
are a
names,
handful
but I think you can
of
still.
past employees of that department that have cost us a lot of money and in fees that will continue.
Yeah,
You know, it's not just like, oh, we're not paying you anymore. It's, oh, we're paying unemployment on you because you did this, or we have other claims that have had to be paid that now affect our ratings overall, that affect our total payroll. So reducing that payroll even reduces all of that, those percentages, and what we'll need to pay into that.
yeah.
I mean, we get a huge refund from our payroll audit from the insurance company too, that would be factored in for not having to have that level of employment. Like, has been expensive to insure. I mean, there's just so
And
like.
then there's also the idea of the maintenance of equipment and such that wouldn't be on our plate either.
Right, and I mean, both of our trucks will be paid off, the big trucks will be paid off. So if they, I mean, sure, if the road commissioner were to drive them once a month so that the brakes didn't seize or something like that, it wouldn't cost us additionally to have it just like pause button, like reset. And even if it's only contracting plowing for the winter, there's still the potential, like, okay, that didn't work, or maybe springtime is not something we can contract out, though at this point, we pretty much do that anyway.
Yeah.
So,
So right now, I wanna back up and I wanna be cognizant of time because this is a huge discussion.
Yeah.
Huge. But right now, the decision that's on the table is that we either need to move forward in purchasing this brand new truck or not. And it sounds like your recommendation is that we do not take delivery of that truck because at this point in time, there's no one in the department to drive that truck.
correct.
Well, I mean, like,
Well,
technically.
Well,
They
Sure,
can.
they could
You
drive.
could. But we would have more vehicles than
But if
bodies.
potentially the direction goes towards contracting out the entire thing based off of what we've budgeted for payroll numbers and what the reality is of that, then it doesn't, like, rushing into a purchase like that is like the absolute worst thing you can possibly do. Like, even if we paused it tonight and
Yeah.
didn't sign them tonight and like kind of chewed on this for a couple of weeks, I think that would be definitely wise.
How long, so they have given us, in those documents, is there anything about how long they will hold the truck for us?
I don't think so. I don't know. I mean,
I completely agree with you. And I think that, honestly, I hate saying this. And I'm gonna like kick myself under the table, but I think we need to have a special meeting about this one subject. Make sure Mark is here, pull in whoever else we think can provide insight into this, and have this bigger discussion around the public works department and the
yeah,
garage.
if I could get like much better numbers than these broad, like, no, we can't have a third person because it would be like
Yeah.
actually get
'Cause the truck
concrete,
is
like
one-
put a presentation together.
The truck is one part of this bigger issue we have with that, the budget we have in that department, the personnel we have in that department.
And it's all so in flux right now that it's like, I feel like taking this on is just we're just gonna be like,
Yeah,
wish we'd waited, or, I mean, and maybe not. Maybe in 2 weeks to go pick up a new truck, but if just like at this very moment, like, I don't know. I do not.
okay, well, can I send around an email around scheduling for a special meeting on this and get feedback from people? And then we can try to knock this out as a part of a special meeting. Again, as Emily said, it's already 8:18. And again, our road commissioner's not here. And it'd be good to have him at the table for a discussion about something like this.
For sure.
All right, cool. So no action is gonna happen tonight on the loan documents. That's fine. Anything else on your agenda?
No.
Oh, good.
Bye.
Well, Erin and I are going to get a drink. I don't know
Oh,
what you guys are gonna do, but. All right, well, thank you.
Regular warrants, I suppose.
Regular warrants. You signed that already, okay. Okay, and I will just note that to date, for the open position of road foreman, we have only received one, application from Shane Lumbra. It's in here if anyone wants to look at it. All right, thanks,
That was
Erin.
emailed, right?
Thank you, Erin.
Yeah,
This is
Thank
the
you,
email
buddy.
that, okay.
All right, so let's buzz back through this and figure out what we passed over, what we have to do. So there is a couple other things on our roads and bridges that we do want to talk about or execute tonight. The first one, this is just the municipal grants and aid FY23 agreement for Black Falls Road. So this is the $31,000 award for the work on Black Falls that we discussed. This was supposed to be here last time, but it wasn't. So is there a motion to execute the standard grant agreement in the amount of $31,000?
I'll make a motion to accept the standard grant agreement in $31,000.
Great. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
Remind me when this work has to be done by?
This has to be done by next year. This is. I don't know if that's even.
I'm not trying to belabor a point at all. I just
No,
wanna
it's a great
make sure
question.
that, like, we are not accepting something we're then like on the hook for if we're not gonna actually be able to get this work done
Yeah.
because
Well,
I think we've got some projects.
this is something that we're going to contract out
Okay. All right.
after we get a bid. All right. Any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great.
Just on the same note, is that grant for the culvert on Hill West? I think that was good till, is it May
Next year.
of next year?
Yep. It's making me note when to revisit grant timelines. Okay, that needed to get done tonight. That's done. The dedication of acceptance to Crocker that I added, we can pass over because I don't know what's going on with that. Buildings and grounds, 98 Main Street. So every week I call the post office on Monday and I call them on Friday. When I called them 2 Fridays ago, I was told that this past Monday they would call me with an answer to my question about what the hell are you guys doing. As of this past Friday, I still haven't heard anything. I called them Friday, no response. I called them today, I have not had a response from them. I am getting to the point where I want to basically tell the US Post Office that they need to respond to our requests for information by fill in the blank, or the town will not renew their lease at that location.
I mean, I feel like at this point, like, why would we renew the lease?
I mean, if they come back and they enter into a conversation with us and they want to stay there and we can, I mean, I'd like to keep the post office on Main Street, but like, at this point, so I do know that they've reached out to St. Ange about renewing the lease in the village. That lease is not up for another 2 years. The fact that they're talking to them about renewing the lease in the village, which is 2 years out, instead of talking to us about renewing the lease in the center, which expires in 2 months, kind of tells me that they don't want to come back to this location.
Yeah.
But I feel like I want to put them on a clock to say, you need to tell us that, because we're not going to sit here with our thumb somewhere it doesn't need to be, waiting for them. Also knowing that we've had interest in that building from a community group looking at a co-working space. We have had interest in selling it. That first entity was a group that leased post office assets back to the post office, so they're off the table. I was approached today about leasing the building to another commercial enterprise that wants to move in there. So we have options, but we cannot act on any of them until we know what USPS wants to do.
Then I think that it's fair to give them a date that they need to respond by.
Can I give them till Friday, the 19th? This Friday. And I'm not saying they have to sign a lease. I'm just saying they have to tell us what they're doing.
How are you going to communicate that?
I'm gonna send an email to Tim. I'm gonna call Jerry. No, Tim is Judy's boss.
Okay.
He's a
Oh,
Mitchford,
he's-
right?
Tim is like
Okay.
Tim is like the last level of local people that we can deal with.
Yep.
The other people are all like Oz. They're behind a curtain somewhere. Jerry is the poom, and Jerry is supposedly the one who is now in charge of all this, who won't call me back.
Okay.
So what I want to do is tomorrow morning email Tim and call Jerry and say by Friday at the close of business, I need a phone call from you with an answer as to whether or not you have any inclination of staying in that building. I'm not saying we need a lease signed. All I want to know is that off the table for you? And if so, tell us that.
I think that it would be wise, yes, to have that phone call, but I think that we also need to have some sort of intent
In writing.
in writing.
In an email.
In an email,
Yeah.
in a fax, however,
In
the
a
post,
letter.
in a letter. if they- a
Well, I will say
certified
that
letter.
I have an email communication from USPS regarding this lease saying we're not going anywhere. That email
Right.
is 4-5 months old. I have no idea if that's still. I mean, I will reference that email in my communications to them,
Okay.
but like,
I just think we need to have something in writing,
yes.
as well as,
Oh, yes.
in addition to a phone call, in
The other
addition
thing
to your
the other
conversation,
thing I've asked
but
Jerry to provide is written notice that they've exited the premises and a written reason why they've done so. Because to date, we have not received that from them. Swear to God, these people are possible. Yeah, very.
Is it understood formally or informally that mold is the reason they left?
I don't know. We told them there was a problem 6 years ago with mold, and like we've given them all the reports. Judy's given them the reports. Judy's tried. I mean, like, I would assume the issue is environmental health concerns, but they didn't give us any reason. For all I know, they left because they didn't like the color of the paint on the building.
Right. Well, assuming that it's environmental health concerns, is the town planning on doing, I mean, if you're gonna rent it to somebody else,
We'd have to address that, certainly.
you'd have to address that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that should be in, you know,
But until
just
they,
like, are there issues that we need to address before you will return?
yeah, I can certainly frame it that way. But they've told us for 6 years there's no issue with that building, and so that is still the assumption I'm working on as far as their perspective on the matter, because we have not heard otherwise.
If they renew this lease, are we on the hook for doing all the mold remediation?
Well, that would be part of the lease renewal negotiations
Yeah.
in terms of what has to happen to the structure. That also gets into like the potential sale of it to this other outfit that wants to lease it to them. And then we have this appraisal.
I think at this point.
Should we cancel the appraisal or postpone the appraisal?
I think that that's dependent upon what, I mean, you said that there are other commercial interests that have approached you that are interested in,
Leasing, not buying.
oh,
Yeah, the ones that have
Then-
approached me are interested in leasing the space, not buying it.
then pause.
Okay, we certainly pause the appraisal.
Am I mistaken, or was there something done about the mold when they made that downstairs, like the teen hangout place?
There's been like multiple times that cleaning's gone on down there. Most recently, about 5 years ago, we got Serve Pro in there and we actually like gutted the basement and cleaned it.
Yeah,
So we've done multiple things
okay.
to try to remediate the
I
situation.
thought so.
But basically the position that we've always said to them is like, we don't know the extent of the problem until we can get into the walls. We have to gut the building basically. All the air quality tests show there's still issues, but like we need to gut the building to get it to the point where we can then say now, and probably fill in the basement, to be honest, because it's always getting water in there. I mean, there's work that has to be done, but
Can the building be lifted to get to the basement?
I don't know.
Oh, it can be demolished, paved it.
It could. I've been waiting
Care of some of the
for
parties
somebody
for
to.
the-
Parking issues that we don't have to
Short-term
worry about
rentals.
dump pads and this and that.
Anyway.
Sorry.
All right, well, I will, if everyone's cool with it, I will notify Jerry. That I won't answer by Friday. And I will call the appraisal company and ask them to put a pin in moving forward with the work for now.
Would an appraisal look at whether or not there are those environmental issues?
I
Because
don't
if
know
they
if-
don't,
I don't know if we'll look at that, but they would look at the fact that there's no tenant there anymore, and they might ask why, but again, I don't know.
well, I mean, because if you're gonna have an appraisal, it really needs to take into consideration whatever the problem is.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, and I would have a conversation with the appraiser beforehand about the history of the building. All right, we've done visitors, we've done updates, we've done that, we've done that, we've done that, we've done that, we've done that ad nauseum. We've done that, we've done that. DRB appointments. Sue is gone. There was a request from the DRB. Request from the DRB. Mark has a lot to do with the farm and can't make regular meetings. Mark agreed to serve as an alternate and moved Mary to the full board member. That is the recommendation from the DRB.
Is that
Mary,
Mary, what's their last name? Garcelle?
I believe so, yes. The motion would be to move Mark to alternate status and appoint Mary as the primary
and that's at the request of
of the DRB
the DRB.
because of Mark's capacity to make regular meetings. Is there a motion?
I don't know who she is.
Mary Garcelle.
She's, do you know Joe and Heather Garcelle? They live out on South, what's that, South Branch Road, or the one just
South
past,
Brook.
South Brook Road, just
South
past
Brook.
Mercy's.
Okay.
They have a house back there. She was often on the, Zoom meetings about the wastewater and everything.
Yeah.
Oh,
The
yes,
lady,
you
white
would
hair.
recognize
yes. All right, I remember her now.
Yeah.
Yes.
I believe, yes, although our website needs to be updated. Okay, so the motion would be to move Mark to the alternate seat and appoint Mary to the primary seat in the DRB to finish out the term.
I'll make that motion.
Great. Second,
I'll second it.
any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Great. Errors and omissions. This is an easy one. This is just from the listers. It's a tweak to Earl and Nancy Lumbra's. Yeah, people should have seen this via email. It would be a difference of an increase of $1,864, mistakenly omitted the new value is the reason. Is there a motion to accept the errors and omissions certificate?
I will make that motion.
Second,
I'll second it.
any discussion? Great, no discussion. Any, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, motion carries. Door knock, all okay, great, I think we're good. Let's go home. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Good night, Mary.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great.